So this is going to be the rocker arm lab. And I know that we've been saying that it's a good idea to first start by kind of planning out your process. But we're going to be using a lot of different things here. And you might not kind of see it first because you might not be aware of that we can do it this way. So what we're going to do is really this is just going to be done in mainly one sketch. Well, it'll actually be two, but the majority of it will be in one sketch. And this view here is what is going to be the one that we primarily use. And then we will use a whole bunch of extrudes to create all the 3D geometry. And then we'll have another sketch here for this. And then we also need to go through and see this note, all fillets and rounds are 2. So these all have fillets on them. They're all rounded edges. So we are going to do things a little funky, but it's going to be interesting. So let's go ahead and get started. Make sure that you have NX in the advanced role. We'll go to new model. It's going to be a model. We're going to be in millimeters. And this is going to be lab 06 A _ ML2. So for this one, we're going to do a model and a drawing. So make sure that you label your files correctly. And save it to a location you can access later. And we'll hit OK. All right, so we're going to create a sketch. And I want to start on the front plane. Gonna hit OK. And we're going to start sketching from this view here. So I'm going to start with this large circle, and the 76 millimeter hole I'm going to save for the afterwards. So we're going to do that with the hole command. Same thing with this 20 millimeter hole through here and the 28 millimeter hole in this orientation. Those are all holes, and we are going to use the hole command for those. So we'll start off with this. And then honestly, I'm going to move around and then add things in as we go. Well, let's go ahead and start doing this. So I'm going to create a circle with the origin, with the center of the circle to be at the origin. It's a diameter of 1/16. And then over here we have this area here that's connected with this webbing. But I'm going to go ahead and draw this first. Just somewhere over here. And I'll dimension it. And then I know it's somewhere over here. And that from here to the center of this arc, this is 96. And under the height, is 56. And we have these R16 fillets that are right here. So if we go to the fillet command, we have a couple of options for that we can choose from. A couple of methods. So the first one is trim and untrim. So if we trim and select our components, then it's actually going to delete our lines that we've created. That is not what we want. What we want is the untrimmed. And then we can come in here and select we have a 16 radius fillet on both sides. Now we've got most of this side done. We need to come back and address a couple of things before we're done with the sketch, but I want to move on over to this side because we have this top line that extends over, and we have a whole bunch of dimensions here. So we have this virtual line that's going through this center. You can see we have this center line here, and we are referencing a lot of stuff on this center line. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first draw this center line, so then I can reference everything off of it. I know the center line is 172 millimeters away from our origin, and we can go from there. I'll do a line. Just somewhere over here. And I'm going to say that it is 172 millimeters away from our origin. And this is going to be reference geometry. So I'm just going to go ahead and say that it is not 703. It is 70 millimeters long. And I will position this, if we look back at our drawing, from the origin to the top of this section is 64 millimeters. So I'll go ahead and position this, that point to the origin. As 64 millimeters. And I'll go ahead and turn this into reference geometry. Now we can make our line from this top point through that reference geometry that we just made. And we're told that this line continues on, and there is a virtual intersection that is 6 millimeters from the top of this point to where this line intersects. And we've already positioned that top point. So we will trim this. And we want this endpoint. Make sure that we get the endpoint. To the point, the top point of the reference line. We want this to be 6 millimeters. Make sure that you get the endpoint. Otherwise, you might get a dimension that is perpendicular to this line. We don't want that because that's going to be at a diagonal to this point. We want the 6 millimeters to be on the same axis as this point. So we need to trim off the line, have an endpoint, select that endpoint, and then select the top of the reference line. So we have this line going through. Now let's look at this section here. We have the center line that goes through, and we're told that the center line of these two lines here, it crosses 16.4 millimeters from this top point. So we can create another line. We want the center here. And I'm just going to cross through that reference point. I'll come through, I'll trim this off. And just like what we did with up here, we're going to do the same thing. We want to make sure that we get the endpoint. We want to make sure that we get the endpoint or the start point of this line. And this is going to be 16.4 millimeters. This, however, is another reference line. We look at our drawing. This is the center line that's actually dimensioned from this edge here. And then we're told that the actual lines are 10 millimeters away from that center line, 20 millimeters total. But that center line goes through the center of that 20 millimeter beam right there. So to create these lines, what I will do is I will create lines. And again, I can spend the time to try to get the line started on the edge of the circle, or I can just come in and start our lines from the inside of the circle, and we'll use the trim command to trim off the excess. So I'm just going to get the line started and make it look just like that. So it starts from the inside of the circle and it doesn't go past our reference line. Same thing for down here, start inside the circle and then I don't want it to go past our reference line. So then I'm going to come here to our constraints. And I want to say make parallel. And I just want to make sure that the lines that we created are parallel with our reference line. So I'll choose one of our lines and I'll choose the reference line. I'll hit apply. I'll choose one of the lines, the reference line, and then hit OK. Just to make sure that both lines are parallel with that reference line. Then I want to dimension where these lines are going to be located at. And they're both going to be located 10 millimeters away from that reference line. So I'll click on the reference line, click on one of the lines, 10 millimeters. Same thing on the other side. We've got 10 millimeters. And then now what I want to do is I'm going to come up to the trim command and I'm going to trim off these lines at this arc. And then I'll come up to the extend command and I'll extend these lines out. Now let's look back at our drawing. So we've got the circle, we've got these fillets, we've got this feature, line, we have these lines. We don't have this, but that's not, in this view, we don't really have any dimensions for that. That's all in this top view. But in this front view, the only other thing we have is this hidden line. We are actually going to go ahead and draw that in, because what we're going to do is the sketch that we've created right now is going to be in the center of our part. And we're going to symmetrically extrude the features from this sketch. And so we actually need this line so that we can dimension this feature here. So we're going to go ahead and draw this in, and then that's going to be it for this sketch, and then we can start extruding some of these features. So we want a line that is 60 millimeters from this edge. Go and draw that line, dimension this so that it is 16 millimeters. All right, so the last thing that we need to do is come over here to our the right part of our model. And so right now we don't have a defined boundary, and we need a defined boundary. So I want to create a line that connects this top line to this bottom line. So I'll come over here, and I want the endpoint for line 5. So line 5 endpoint. It's important to grab that line because that's the top one. And then there's line 9. And then I'm going to come down here to the endpoint of this line. Endpoint of line 10. And that's where we want to have our line. It doesn't look like anything has changed, but we will be able to actually create boundaries now. So we can go ahead and finish this sketch. And now if we look back at our drawing, we can move up to this section and this section. So our sketch is essentially down the center of this part. So we're going to make symmetrical extrusions, and we're also going to mess with the starting point on some of the extrusions, which we haven't done before. So let's start with this 1/16 diameter round piece that we actually started our sketch with. So we are going to go to extrude, but we're going to do something different. So I can select the round section right here with just connected curves, but it's going to become difficult later on using this method. But we can select what we want to extrude with using region boundary curves. And what that does is that allows us to actually select the section that we want. And see how I can select all of the sections that we've made? And so we can go in and we can actually specify for this boundary, I want to extrude this amount. And this is how we're going to extrude all these individual components. So we're going to start off with our circle. And remember, we want a symmetric value here. It's going to be 76 millimeters. Just go ahead and hit OK. And we're going to move on and kind of piece this all together with the extrusions. So we got the 76 millimeter. This webbing, the fillet that we did is the 40 millimeter. Go back to extrusion. We're still in region boundary curve. Want this to be symmetric. This is 40 millimeter. We want to make sure, though, that we are uniting all these together. If we don't unite, we're actually making multiple solid bodies. So we want to make sure that we are uniting all these together. Hit apply. This web section here, which is going to be this top area and then this beam that we created, is actually dimensioned over here in this section A. We have a section view that's split right here. So we're actually seeing this top webbing area and then this bottom beam that we have. So the top webbing is 20 millimeters and the bottom is 40. We can select this top web right here. Again, we want to go to symmetric value. This is 20 millimeters. Make sure that we're uniting. Apply. Select the bottom, symmetric. This is 40. Hit apply. And now this area is where things start to change a little bit. And this is why we specifically wanted to put in this rectangular area. That's why we wanted to put in this line, because we have this dimension up here. So we have this cutout area. The edge of this cutout area is that line that we put in. So this whole section right here is still kind of what we've done before, but we don't have an exact dimension for it. What we know is that we have a 12, a 28, and a 12. And that is the total distance that it's extruded. And just like we've done always, when we have to add things together, divide things, we're not going to add these numbers together outside of NX. We're just going to put them in NX and have it add it for us. That way, everything we've done is documented. So I'm going to choose this section here, symmetric value, and I'm going to add 12 plus 12 plus 28. Make sure I'm uniting, and I'll hit apply. And then for the pieces that are on the top and bottom here, so again, we're going to do the same thing. We're not going to do any math outside of NX. We're going to leave it all up to NX. We know that this middle section is, there's a 28 millimeter gap. But we know the thickness of each of these sides are 12 millimeters. So we're going to change our starting point to be this half of 28 millimeters. So the starting point is going to be, 14 millimeters away from this middle section. And then we're going to go to the 12 millimeters thickness. Then we're going to do is actually, we're just going to mirror this section. So rather than making this symmetrical, I'll select the curve. My starting point is going to be 28 millimeters divided by 2. So that's the 14 right there. The value that I'm going to go to, it's not going to be a value. It'll be until extended. And I'm going to select that wall that we just made. And I'm going to hit OK. Because then what I'm going to do is I will mirror this feature. And the reference plane is going to be the plane that we drew the sketch on. So it's going to be that XZ plane. And I'll go ahead and show the results. Make sure that everything is correct. And I'll go ahead and hit OK. All right, so we've done everything that we can do as far as the extrusions go. Other thing that we need to do is we need to make this feature here. So we're told that the outer diameter is 52 millimeters and the top of it is 64 millimeters from the origin. There's lots of ways to do this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to actually create a plane along the bottom here, and then we can sketch on that plane and extrude it up. So I'm going to create a datum plane. I want to add a distance. The reference plane is going to be our XY plane. And the distance that I wanted is the 64 minus the 44. So it's be 64 millimeters minus 44 millimeters. And I'm going to go ahead and enlarge this just so that I can see it a little bit better. So now I have a plane created at the bottom of our hole over here, or this section of the rocker arm. Now I'll go ahead and create a sketch on that plane. I'm going to start with a circle, and I want the circle to be on this horizontal axis right here. See how it's snapping to that axis? I'm going to go ahead and constrain it to that. Look at the drawing. It's 52 millimeters in diameter. Change this to 52. Now what I want to do is I want to constrain the center of this 52 millimeter circle to be on the same line that is created here. So remember, we dimensioned this point already to be where the center of the circle is located. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a make coincident, and I want to choose the center of the circle. And then I want to select one of these lines. If you cannot select this line, make sure that you are within work part only. If you're within the active sketch only, you won't be able to select it. So we want to be within work part only. And we can just select one of those lines and hit OK. So we have been constrained to the horizontal axis that's right here. And then also we made a coincident on this line that is already been dimensioned where this circle needs to be. Sketch is fully constrained. We can go ahead and hit finish. And we can extrude this. Our start value is going to be the 0. And then the distance that we actually want to go is 44 millimeters. And notice that we are subtracting. We don't want to subtract. What we want to do is we actually want to unite here. We'll go ahead and hit OK. Now we've had a whole bunch of different extrusions where we had to unite a whole bunch of geometry. And there's a lot that could go wrong with that if we just overlooked one of the unites and actually accidentally did a none. We'd actually have multiple solid bodies here. A quick check for whether or not we have one solid body or multiple solid bodies is to go up to unite. And if all of our geometry is selected when we go to select the body, then we actually have one solid body. However, if whenever we hovered over our part, one section was grayed out, or maybe multiple sections were grayed, we weren't selecting those bodies, then we would have multiple solid bodies. So let's say that last extrusion that we did, let's go back, and we accidentally hit none. Right now it looks the exact same, but when we come over to unite, see how it's not being selected? That's an indication that we have two solid bodies here. So that's a good check to see whether we actually have one solid body or multiple. Now, of course, we want to make sure that we are uniting all of our geometry together, because all we're doing is adding to our solid body. We are not creating multiple solid bodies here. So the next thing that we need to do is add all of our holes. So we've got a 76 millimeter hole here, a 20 millimeter hole, and then a 26 or 28 millimeter hole. So let's go ahead and create all of that. So we'll use hole commands for all these holes. This is a 76 millimeter. Simple hole is fine. We don't need to go into a sketch because all we're going to be doing is the center of this hole. So we can just approach this hole and then constrain it to the center. This is going to be a through hole. We can hit apply. Move on to the second hole, which is going to be here. This is a 20 millimeter. We can approach this radius. Want to be at the center of that radius. And again, this is going to be a through hole. So the cool thing about this through hole here is that it's actually going to split. It's going to go across the gap and continue on, which is what we want. So we can hit apply. And then the third hole is going to be 28 millimeters. And it's going to be at the center of this feature. Again, another through hole. And we'll hit OK on this one because we are going to be done with our holes. Now, the last thing we need to do for the model is we have this note over here that all fillets and rounds are R2. And we have edge blends for all of this geometry here. So we need to add these edge blends to our part. All right, so now we want to add edge blends to the part. And then we will start the drawing. Now, we'll warn you that some of the edge blends can be a little bit difficult to put onto the part. And if you come across these difficulties, I suggest that you just try a different order. Sometimes there's no problems at all. Sometimes there are problems. It all has to do with the order that you select the lines that are going to be edge blended together. So I'll quickly go ahead and do some of these edge blends. And then there'll be another video for the drawing section. All right, so once we have all the edge blends in, we can go ahead and get ready for our sketch.